So it's 2011 and I'm newly divorced. I'm in my mid-20s and a single mother. I decide to try out some online dating sites. I start talking with this guy on one of the sites. We seem to have a lot in common and he seems pretty normal. I decide to give him my phone number. We continue chatting via text and phone calls. Well, I suggest to go get some coffee and meet up. He states he doesn't drink coffee. Okay. I suggest we have drinks at the bar. He says he doesn't drink alcohol. Then he has a great idea. Let's go for a hike. I reluctantly agree. This was the first red flag. He wants to go to this place called Bats-2 in South Jersey, which is a historic village with old abandoned buildings, hiking trails, and the home of the New Jersey Devil. Great place for a first date. So I suggest we meet up at the main parking lot, and he has a better idea. He says let's meet at the train station nearby, and he'll drive us over, because he knows another entrance with better hiking trails. Second red flag. I, again, reluctantly agree, not wanting to be rude. So the day of the date comes, and for whatever dumb reason, I didn't tell anyone I was doing this. I think because I was embarrassed for using a dating site, and I knew somewhere in the back of my mind my friends would have tried to talk me out of it. So I pull up to the train station, and he's in a late 90s Bronco. Okay, not so bad. We can't all afford newer cars. He gets out, and he's actually the guy from the pictures. Okay, initial sigh of relief. We get in the car, and he starts to head to the secret hiking trail entrance. We have a nice conversation on the way there. All seems good. We get there, and as soon as we get out of the car, I go to grab my phone. He says, "No, just leave it here. I have mine." Red flag, waving in my fucking face. Again, being polite and not wanting to argue, I comply. I see the entrances, and one directs you towards a village and humanity, so I naturally suggest that one. He says no, and points to the other trail that goes God knows where. I again, being the good girl I am, say, okay. Right before we set off, a bit of rebellion sets in. You know, I should really have my phone with me. He starts to argue, and I'm like, no, I need it in case the babysitter calls about my son. He gives in and unlocks his car, and I grab my phone. We set off down the trail, side by side. We are talking, and everything seems okay. I start thinking, I was overreacting before. All is good. We get to the part of the trail where you can only go one by one, so I say, you go first, and I'll follow. He says, oh no, you go, so in case you trip or anything, I can grab you. I do that nervous giggle thing, and politely decline, saying how bad I am at following paths. He insists I go first, in a stern voice. Red flags with sirens. But I simply comply. The trail is getting narrower by the second, and the woods are getting darker because of the amount of trees and brush. We are no longer talking, and the only sounds are the crunching of our footsteps. Panic starts setting in. I look back at him, and he's just got a scowl on his face, and a dead look in his eyes. I try to smile at him, but nothing. So I stop and say, let's turn back. I like it better when we could walk next to each other and talk, still being polite. He says he wants to keep going this way. So I say, no really, I want to go back the other way. And I start to do just that. As I walk past, he grabs my arm and blocks my path. I don't say anything and just casually grab my phone out of my pocket. He lets me go, saying, fucking whatever, and we walk back towards the car in silence, me with my phone in my hand the whole time. Amazingly, I did have a signal. As we reach the clearing where the cars are parked, he looks at his watch and states he has to go now. He has somewhere he needs to be. We were only on the date for less than an hour, but okay, I'm not complaining. For whatever dumb reason, I get back in his car. We drive in almost silence the entire way back to my car, me with a death grip on my phone, and him looking miserable. He drops me off at my car and speeds away. I never heard from him again. Me being naive, I want to believe that there was no chemistry between us. But let's be honest, when I decided to fuck politeness and grab my phone that day, I spoiled his dastardly plans. As a youngster, I was working in a food store. The shop was open 24/7, so naturally, sometimes I had to take the night shift. To be honest, I preferred working at night because there aren't as many customers and I didn't have to overwork. Plus, the money was slightly better. Usually, I was working with the same guy from the team, and this was a rule. Our boss didn't want to leave the shop with just one person. The area wasn't dangerous. There was mostly single-family houses and schools, and it was in a safer area. One day I came in to work the night shift. I was waiting for my friend to join me when the phone rang. It was Tom, my workmate. He said his car had broken down in the middle of nowhere, and he couldn't leave it there. I didn't want to stay in the shop alone, but I understood that Tom couldn't just leave his car too. I would usually call Julia, another workmate, but I knew it was her birthday and she was throwing a party and I didn't want to ruin her night. I called my boss and I told him I would manage on my own, and he agreed on that. The night was quiet and calm. The shop was visited by parents who forgot to buy milk for their children, young men who wanted some beer, and teenagers who wanted to buy popcorn before they started to watch a horror film. After 11, it fell silent, so I opened a book and started reading. I was entirely wrapped by the crime story I was reading when I lifted my head and saw a man standing at the street, staring at the shop. Usually I wouldn't pay it no mind, but this case was unusual. The man was wearing a white suit, a hat, and had crutches, as he didn't have a right leg. I felt awkward. He was just staring at the shop and looking at me. After some minutes I was scared and regretted that I hadn't ruined Julia's night and asked her to come and join me. After some time the guy left, but I still felt nervous. I was alone in the shop and didn't want to call anybody and wake them up. I decided that reading a book will be an excellent way to start thinking about something else. I opened the next page and the telephone rings. I picked it up and said, "Hello, how can I help you?" Nobody replied. I heard the sound of breathing. I asked again who was calling, but after some seconds, the person hung the phone up. This was the moment I was terrified. I was sure it was the guy in the white suit. I had plenty of strange thoughts in my head, including the one that I was a protagonist of a horror movie and was gonna die in some minutes. I knew I couldn't stay in the shop alone anymore. I called my father and immediately asked him to come pick me up. I also sent my boss a message that I had to close the shop because I felt sick. My father came in around 15 minutes, as he was also scared after hearing my story. For me, it was the longest 15 minutes of my life. I locked up the shop and was fighting the irrational thoughts in my head. After my dad came, I felt relief, but I also didn't imagine going back to work at night again. The next day I wanted to hand in my notice. I knew the shop was 24/7 and all the workers took different shifts, so I didn't want to ask for any special treatment. I went to the shop and started to explain everything to my boss, telling him that I'm leaving, when he interrupted me. He said to me that he was talking with some man 2 hours ago, the man with one leg. I think my heart stopped beating for a minute after that. My boss continued to say that the man came to the shop to say sorry for staring at the shop and calling at night. The guy assumed that he must have scared me by calling. The man also said that he had been many years abroad and came to the town after 50 years that night. He was looking at the shop because he was living there when he was a kid. As we understood, it was a normal house back then. His family had to leave the country because of political persecution. The man called the shop because he found the number in the yellow pages, and wanted to ask how long the shop existed. Plus, he didn't even know I saw him. When he was calling, he didn't say anything that moment because it was very emotional for him. He started crying, and of course, he didn't want to talk in such condition. All in all, he wanted to know what happened to the house during those years. I was bewildered hearing the story and didn't know if I wanted to leave my job anymore or not. Happily, my boss told me the shop can only be open at night if there are 2 workers, otherwise it would have to be closed. In the end, I stayed at the shop for some time and promised myself not to work at night alone anymore. I haven't met the guy in the suit. He probably left town, but I hope he's okay after that. First things first, I work in a very well-known casino in Lincoln, California. I'm a porter, and I work the graveyard shift. Pretty much what I do is deliver water to the bars, do garbage, replace bags, help servers, bartenders, and bar backs. I'm used to strange people because criminals, meth heads, and just straight up weirdos are always here at this time. People don't scare me. I'm a 6-foot beefy fellow, and there are cameras everywhere. There's only one area that unnerves all the porters, and it's the 2nd floor storage area. All of us don't like it, and we always pair up when one of us has to go up there. The reason is that it's so loud on the casino floor and the staff halls, but it is too quiet on the 2nd floor. That's probably the main reason. Well, Gerald, my best work buddy, who was a 6'9", 290-pound ginger with a beard, and I had to take the portable bar in the storage area in our section. I grabbed the heavy one, and he grabbed the other one, and we took the giant elevator up and started walking. Now this is important. It's a 90-foot walk with 3 large right turns into the actual storage room, and this hall had scaffolding everywhere because of the construction at the hotel, which was directly above us, so we had to maneuver around. It's quieter than usual because the air conditioning isn't on due to the construction, which resumes at 8 a.m. We make it into the storage room. The storage room is massive. There are 5 chain-linked fence blocks with about 1 to 3 sections per block. Each block is about 83 feet by 45 feet, with pathways between them, which fit about 6 people standing shoulder to shoulder. Now each block has its different level of visibility. Some you can see between the shelves, and others don't go over 4 feet high, so you can see anything over 4 feet, and others had 0 visibility. Our section is the 3rd block. We take a left into the last section. There are also very few cameras. We put away the bar without much issue. We walk back and chat about the Justice League. We make it 20 feet to exit the hall, and I heard something. It sounded like someone covered their mouth and laughed, which is weird because no one's supposed to be up here other than Gerald and I. I stopped and turned my head to look slightly behind me. Gerald stopped and looked at me confused. Did you hear that? Hear what? We both listened intently, and sure enough, a small cackling occurred again. What the fuck is that? I don't know. Let's leave, I said. Wait, let's see what it was, he replied. I watch horror movies, and I know cliché when I see it. I point this out to Gerald, and he said he was going to investigate it, and that splitting up would be a way more dangerous option. I reluctantly go with him. We walk up to the 1st block, and I hear it on the other side of the 1st block. We peek behind the corner, and we see on the left side of the 2nd block a construction helmet slightly peeking from around the corner. After 2 seconds, it disappeared. We hurried to the other side, but it was gone. We go forward a little more, and we heard cackling, but it was farther, on the 4th block. Luckily, the 4th block only had 1 blind spot, which was where the helmet was. So Gerald goes around to try to intercept it. I keep my eyes on it. He gives me a signal, and we both charge it. It leans back, and we nearly run into each other. We look down to see the empty construction helmet on the ground. We were dumbstruck. There were no other exits, and we would have seen whoever if they ran. No other place to hide, and we would have heard if someone climbed a fence. We look around. No answers. Gerald finally agrees that we should leave. We hurry out. I peer over my shoulder, and after we pass the exit, I see it again, peer slightly over the doorway. We bolt to the elevator through the scaffolding. We make it to the elevator and quickly got inside. We hear a wet slapping sound by the scaffolding. The elevator closes and we go down. We were both so nervous. I still have no idea if someone was fucking with us or something else. Hi everyone. So lately I've had some requests to finally share the whole story of the homeless man I actually took in as a tenant and the incidents that followed. I'm just saying in advance, this is a long one, but every detail is relevant. Please note, although everything I have documented is factual, the case was never solved and has likely gone cold since this happened more than 10 years ago. So back in 2007, I found myself working as a bartender at a now closed pub in my hometown. Not a job I particularly liked, but it paid the bills. At this time, they had hired a new kitchen manager that we will simply know as Kearney. Kearney was a pleasant enough man, mostly keeping to himself, but always stayed late to help the barman do our closing duties, so we all liked him for that. New in town, Kearney had yet to find a place of a permanent residence, and I had recently lost my tenant, so someone suggested he ask me. He was considerably older than the tenants I usually took in, but having a streak of bad luck with tenants my own age, I thought an older man with a nice steady job may be a shift in the right direction, so I agreed. Kearney wasted no time and followed me home that very same night. Only he wasn't alone. Enter Lawrence, the boyfriend of Kearney. Honestly, I didn't even realize he was gay up to that point, but was water off my back regardless, looking back now. What really should have bothered me though was Lawrence's appearance. He looked like he had been sleeping on the street. So Kearney moved in. Lawrence was there a lot too, and it was easy to know when, due to his ringtone sounding like quacking of ducks. Kearney had some habits that were rather noteworthy to the story. In particular, he basically never closed his door, no matter what he was doing in there. It was always wide open. 2. Although he was a very heavy smoker, he never once smoked inside the house. So Kearney had been living there for about 2 weeks when I had come down with an awful case of pink eye. This being highly contagious, I was given a leave of absence from my bartending job, and therefore decided to go wait it out at my sister's for a few days. Apparently, I didn't mind giving it to her. So the day my sister was scheduled to come pick me up, I took a casual stroll into the bar that myself and Ben, my good friends from high school, at the time co-worker, had been building in my house. And something caught my eye. All the liquor bottles were completely empty. Now, those who had been frequenting my house at the time would know that we're not just talking about 1 or 2 bottles of brandy here, but bottles of whiskey, gin, vodka, schnapps, liqueurs. Basically, it was a full-stock bar that could host a pretty big party without requiring much in the way of additions. So I called Kearney in, asking him if he knew anything about this, receiving feedback that Lawrence and he had been on a slight drinking binge. Those were the actual words he used that had left me both furious about the thousands worth of stock they had drank, but also slightly impressed that they were actually still alive. Regardless, I said I would be dealing with it upon my return. So I'm with my sister for a few days, and on a Friday I get a call from the local police department asking me if I know a Conrad Schultz. Ironically enough, I didn't. They finally add that I would probably know him as Kearney, and that I should probably come down to the station, as they had just arrested his boyfriend for trying to sell my camera equipment. So my sister rushes me back home, where all my camera equipment was on display at the police station. It was on this visit that I'm informed that Lawrence was actually a Navy SEAL who got dishonorably discharged before turning to a life of crime and now had a rap sheet the length of a Bible. The kicker was both he and Kearney were actually homeless men who had met at the Salvation Army. So Lawrence is in jail and my sister drops me off at home. Based on Kearney's account of what happened, he had turned Lawrence in himself as he couldn't allow Lawrence to do what he was trying to do. Although I appreciate the sacrifice, I told Kearney that he would have to go, having been the overall cause of all this. However, not wanting to leave him a homeless man, I gave him until the end of the month to make other arrangements. So Monday came around, and having just completed a staff meeting, I walk home to encounter a very much free Lawrence, sitting on the sidewalk across my house, watching it. I confront Lawrence as to why he's there, and he tries to apologize before begging for money. I dismissed him without giving him a cent. Now, I go back to the previous night. See, I mentioned having a staff meeting for a reason, as it was at the meeting where we had gotten a rather sizable list of liquor bottles that had gone missing from the storeroom, leaving us all suspecting each other. I, however, would not have to wait long to figure out who the real culprit was, as a few days later, I opened the garage bin to see the missing bottles, all empty and staring back at me. I decided to sit on this information for the time being, although I did photograph it just in case I needed the evidence later. I also called over Ben to inform him of the developments. As this was quickly becoming a detective game, we decided to enter Kearney's room and search for further evidence. Nothing of vast significance in there, with one exception. 2 single photographs of Lawrence before he had turned into the homeless version of Lex Luthor or Charles Xavier. Actually, there were several of Lawrence's things still in there, but as Lawrence spent a lot of time there before the incident, I accepted this as normal. Now, I should also add that I mentioned Lawrence's release to Kearney and told him that if I suspected that they were still seeing each other, I would throw him out of the house myself. Only a few days would pass before this came into play. On this particular night, I had been bartending again, and Kearney had constantly been stopping by the bar to help himself to glasses half full of wine and half full of Coke, which he would drink outside the restaurant. We confronted him about this, but as he correctly pointed out, he was still a manager, and we had no right to tell him what he could do or could not do. On his 4th trip, however, I had grown suspicious and decided to follow him outside, where I encountered Lawrence sitting outside, sharing half a Coke wine concoction with Kearney. This pissed me off, so the next day I returned to the restaurant with the photographic evidence and handed it over to the general manager, who was also kind of my friend. Although I hadn't physically seen it, I had heard a confrontation through the office door when he fired Kearney. Kearney left, obviously upset, and apparently had no idea that I had been the one to turn him in. So we had to close early that night, and I was walking home. Going past the high school, I saw Kearney coming in the opposite direction. He walked past me, literally only saying 2 words, "I'm scared," before disappearing into the darkness. That would be the last time I would ever physically lay eyes on Conrad Schultz. So we reached the final week, and before Kearney's eviction was to take place, Ben had to come to stay with me for the duration, as we both wanted to monitor the situation and make sure nothing else happens. It was in this week that Kearney's behavior suddenly changed. He was constantly smoking in his room and had his door closed 24/7. In fact, neither Ben or I caught so much of a peek of him in that entire week, which we hadn't thought much of at the time. So the day of Kearney's eviction comes around. Ben had to go home for a few hours, and I finally hear Kearney's bedroom door open. Someone walks out of the room, opens the front door, and leaves. I follow him outside, but somehow he had already completely disappeared. They had left the house keys, indicating that he obviously wasn't planning to come back. I took the keys, noticing something strange. Although the correct keys were still on the keychain, there were also several that weren't mine. Why would he leave me the wrong keys? I remember thinking to myself as I walked into his room. His room was a shock, not because of the state it was in. The two had broken the beds. It had acted wild monkey sex, but I had already known that. As I said, he never closed the damn door. But more that he literally left almost all his belongings behind, with one exception. You guessed it, the 2 photos of Lawrence. Upon further investigation, I suddenly realized that all traces of Lawrence ever being there had completely vanished, with all the Kearney stuff still left behind. There was one thing of Lawrence left behind though, his duck ringtone, which it turned out hadn't been so much a ringtone, but an actual duckling, which now strolled around casually in the vacant bedroom. We named him Neville. So Ben returns and gets updated about the developments. Both of us are thinking the way he left was rather weird. Of course, the whole thing has been weird. It was only when I asked the infamous question that this all became a conspiracy theory. Did you actually see Kearney in this last week? It was to our shock that we realized neither of us had. Suddenly putting the puzzle pieces together, the changing of habits, Neville the duck, the wrong keys, only Lawrence's stuff being gone. It was a great discomfort that we both asked the question, who had really been living in our house this last week? During the next few days, Ben and I went on a mission searching the town, crawling into drain pipes, trying to find any trace of Kearney, but they all added up to nothing. Conrad Schultz had simply vanished off the face of the earth. That wasn't the case with Lawrence though. No, he was still around. Having made some new homeless friends, we encountered him several times begging on the streets. I asked him every time, "Where's Kearney, Lawrence?" And he just acted like he never heard of him. The last time I would see Lawrence was across from work, attempting to break into a car. I had called the police on him, and they arrived rather quickly, arresting him on the spot. While he was being led away by the police, I shouted at him one last time, "Where's Kearney, Lawrence?" But he just ignored me, and the cops dragged him away. The next day I filed a police report, reporting Kearney as a missing person, and suggesting that Lawrence may know something about it. But nothing ever came of it. So Lawrence, I don't know if you did something to Kearney or not, but if you did, let's not meet again. I had an acquaintance in high school who had some issues. He had a disability. My school had a very progressive population. Lots of anti-bullying campaigns. Of course, he was bullied a little bit, but the majority of the school was nice to him. He was very mean. He was constantly cussing at other kids and threatening them. I remember in 8th grade, we were in the same science class. We had to give a presentation on nuclear weapons and debate on whether dropping nukes on Japan was the right choice. He printed out pictures of the victims of the bombs. He kind of laughed a little while as he talked about it. He went into full detail about their deaths. Teacher had to tell him to stop and sit down. No one was laughing. Everyone was kind of creeped out. There was also another time a kid mocked him in the hallway. He turned around and said very calmly and confidently, "You won't be doing this when I show up with a 12 gauge. Are you Christian? I bet God won't save you." It sent chills down my body. From then out, I stayed as far away from him as possible. He lived with his grandparents, and they took great care of him. One night, his grandfather had came home, and there was an argument. The boy went into his grandparents' room and grabbed the .22 rifle and shot his grandfather multiple times. His grandfather died a few days later at the hospital. I was at juvenile court later on. I did something dumb and had to appear in front of a judge. Sure enough, I saw the boy. He had been locked up for a while. He was in a green jumpsuit and was handcuffed. He was being escorted into a courtroom ahead of the rest of us. He saw me and apparently recognized me. He smiled at me, but not a friendly smile, a creepy one. One that sent chills down my spine. I never saw him again after that, and I'm not really sure what happened to him. This happened to me my freshman year of college. Tinder was new, and everyone at my university was on that app. I joined to see what all the fuss was about. Looking through profiles, I found a few guys that were really interesting. This one guy in particular caught my eye. We will call him Walter. I swipe right on Walter, and we match. I was excited and kinda giddy because he was super attractive. He messages me, and I get butterflies in my stomach. We message on the app for maybe an hour. Typical conversation is happening. I ask him what he does for a living, and he asked me what my major was. Harmless conversation. After a while, he asked me for my number so we could text instead of messaging on the app. I gave it to him. He seemed nice enough. We messaged back and forth for a few days. Lots of flirty conversations and plans to hang out finally occurred. By the 4th day of our conversation, he started calling me babe, which gave me mixed feelings. It was cute, but also a little weird. We didn't really know each other and had never met. I ignored it and continued on with the conversations. He started saying he wanted to be exclusive and he really wanted to see me in person. He was begging me at this point to come to his apartment to cuddle and watch movies with him and his dog. I told him that our first date needed to be in public and I would not be going to some stranger's apartment. He said I was overreacting and kept begging. I decided to ignore him for the rest of that night. The next day he apologized and said he understood why we needed to meet in public. So we made plans that weekend. The weekend came faster than I expected, and it was the day we were supposed to meet. Something just felt off and I decided to back out. I texted him apologizing, saying my mom wasn't feeling well and needed me to come home to help her with some house chores. This made him annoyed, and he said, "Your mom is a big girl. If she needs you, she can just call you. Just come over, and you can leave whenever to go help her. I really want to see and kiss you." I told him no, that I would be staying with my mom that weekend, and that was that. I only lived about 30 minutes from home, so I actually do go home to see my mom that day. After what he said about my mom, I started ignoring him, and the text started rolling in. Text after text. "Babe, I'm sorry. Please come over. Babe, I miss you. Are you gonna come over?" I planned on replying the next day that I was just busy with my mom. Then he started calling me. I had a total of 45 missed phone calls within a 2-hour period. He left voicemails saying that he was sorry and that he just missed me and wanted me to call him back. Similar voicemails continued almost the entire time I was home. My roommate texted me shortly after I finished dinner with my mom and asked if we could go out that night. I agreed and went back to my university dorm. Suddenly, the calls from Walter started increasing again. More texts, voicemails, and he started messaging me again on Tinder, asking me why I wasn't replying to him. I wasn't planning on replying until I got a message on Instagram that said, "Why didn't you tell me you were coming back to town tonight?" Getting this message really freaked me out. I replied to him and said, "Sorry, I've been busy with my mom. How did you know I was back in town?" He said, "Well, I checked your Tinder, of course." Tinder doesn't show exact locations, but has a within 1 mile message. This really freaked me out, and I messaged him back saying that he was being real creepy. He seriously had to be constantly refreshing my profile to see the distance change. The messages, calls, and voicemails continued. All were him apologizing for making me feel weird about him knowing where I was. He was just worried about me. We had been texting for less than a full week. I told my roommate about it, and so we decided to stay in for the night. The last straw for me was getting a message saying, "Look, I'm really sorry. I'm outside your dorm with flowers and chocolate. Please forgive me." Oh hell no. I called the campus security and told them about this guy, but they never found anyone waiting outside my doors. I'm assuming he was in his car waiting for me to reply. I blocked him on all my socials, phone number, deleted Tinder, and haven't been back on since. I have seen him once, out and about in town, but he didn't recognize me, thankfully. Walter, if you read this, I'm glad we never met. Thanks for making me second guess every single guy I find attractive. I was in the middle of a job where I had been contracted to build a new control system for a calendar mill that rolled rubber into sheets. I had installed new control panels, and during setup, the system did not work as expected. So I was under a lot of pressure to find the problems and correct them. I had been poring over the schematics, looking for design errors, when I found a possible problem. This was late on a Saturday night, and I wanted to check the panel to see what could be causing the problem. When I got to the factory, it was closed. Normally, it stays open 24 hours, but this was a holiday weekend, and they had closed the entire plant. I had a security card that opened the doors 24/7, so I just went in through the back door and used the headlight to make my way through the panel that I had installed. I took off the back panel and sat on the floor. As I was busy tracing the wiring, a light was shined into my eyes, and someone yelled, "Freeze!" I look up to see two cops pointing their guns at me, and they were shaking with fear. It was not the cops with the guns that frightened me. It was a raw fear that I saw in the cops' faces that had me scared. They had responded to a silent alarm that I did not know existed, and they had entered the same door that I had left open into the dark, scary factory floor. They had seen my headlight bobbing around behind the strange panel and taken me as a robber or an industrial spy. We all laughed after I straightened it up with them. I actually knew one of the cops. They both said that they were scared shitless of having to creep up on me in the dark, seeing my light flashing around. I often work at night, so as to not to get in the way of production. In another incident, I was working at an unfamiliar city at night in an industrial area. It was cold, with 6 inches of snow on the ground. All the equipment in the building was shut down, except for the industrial furnace that had a noisy blower running on a timer. The timer ran down, and the furnace stopped, leaving it dead silent, except for the footsteps I could hear someone walking across the roof. At first I thought I was hearing things, but they started up again, and I followed them from below. I went to the back door, made sure it was locked, and peered out the doors towards my car 50 meters away in the parking lot. It was then I noticed footsteps in the snow going around my car and right to the door where I was at. Just then I hear rattling and the shadow of someone coming from the fire ladder. I hide from the window behind a metal grinder and saw 3 hooded men drop from the fire ladder and go back towards my car. They peered into the doors, so here I was in a strange city with 3 men trying to break into my car and the building I was in. I finally found a phone in the office and called 911. It took forever for the cops to get there, over 30 minutes. It turned out that there were 3 kids in a gang who had set up their hideout on the roof of the building that was normally empty at night. They had hidden stash of stolen goods on the roof. No big deal, but hearing footsteps on the roof of an empty building in the dark of night really got to me. So about 13 years ago, when I was maybe 4 or 5, my grandma used to work for this disabled guy. His name was Rudy, and my brother and I used to go there while my grandma worked. When my brother went back to school, I was still too young to go to school, so I stayed in his house with my grandmother. I was often left alone with him because my grandma had to go to the store to get groceries and whatnot. He was really nice at first, but he always had an off feeling surrounding him. I was a kid and didn't care about it though. He was always doing weird things, and it should have been obvious that I shouldn't trust him, but I couldn't not trust him. He would always give me snacks and toys. How could you dislike someone who does that? I remember the first time he did something. He pulled down my pants. I thought it was a game at first, so I tried to run away. He wouldn't let go of my pants though. I didn't see anything wrong with it at the moment of time. He tried pulling me towards him, but I was running in the opposite direction. I wasn't going to let him, not because I knew it was wrong, but because I thought it was a game. I finally got away and pulled my pants back up. I ran into the living room and acted as if nothing happened. But that's what it seemed, as if it was normal to do. He did this numerous amount of times, to the point where I knew it was wrong, and I got uncomfortable. This is all I remember him doing, but I'm not sure if he did anything else. It was years ago, and this is the first time I've chosen to type about it, or tell anyone, because I felt as if it was my fault, and I didn't want to be viewed differently, so I kept it to myself. This is a shorter story, but I think it fits here. I had just turned 18 at the time, and after getting out of a shitty high school romance, I figured I'd give Tinder a try. I didn't really plan on going on any dates. I just wanted to talk to new people, and then maybe someone would pique my interest. Let me set the scene. It's my senior ball. I'm all glammed up in my vintage dress and having a pretty good time, despite not having a date. The night was calming down, so I was sitting on my phone while a slow song played. I opened my Tinder to see if I had any new matches, and I did. A guy who was decently attractive and only a year older than me asked if I wanted to go on a date. I declined, but he seemed pretty insistent. To be fair, it wasn't a very harsh no, because I didn't want to hurt his feelings. He then proceeds to spam me with different date ideas. I tried to ignore it and just go back to my friends. I checked my phone maybe 15 minutes later, and he had sent me pictures of an empty school parking lot that was maybe 2 blocks away from the reception hall I was at. He was asking me to meet him there and said that he would bring drinks and we could get drunk together. I told him no. He asked if Walmart would be better. I proceeded to block him and didn't pick up the app for a little while after. This was a while ago, so my memory of that night is a bit spotty, so I probably missed some details that would make this a little creepier. So, where do I start? I guess I can begin with a bit of background. This story takes place at a Kroger. I wasn't a customer or anything, no. I was an employee. I'm Nightshift, which means no one else is in the store but us employees. But when the store opens, there's a couple hours of opportunity to interact with the customers. So I met this man, and he looked like he was in his 60s, probably 6 foot tall. I'm 5'4", and he walked with a slow pace and a limp. Nothing too threatening, right? Now, I've seen this guy all the time, sometimes even with his wife. He didn't say anything bad to me at first, just, "You're working too hard." And that's it. I would usually answer back with, "Hardly working." Nothing bad, so very harmless and forgetful. I moved on with my shift. It goes like this for a while, with the same greeting and everything, sometimes even making a bit of small talk. He never really had anything special to say. "I used to teach karate," he says, "and I'm a 3rd degree black belt, until they kicked me out." No lie, he actually said kicked me out. So me being curious and dumb, I asked why, for reasons I honestly cannot remember. But I think in that moment of curiosity, he saw an opportunity to literally vent to me. This is where harmless goes downhill. He would share too much, way too much. He would say things like, "My wife hates my guts and constantly says she wants to divorce. My kids want nothing to do with me and took away all my weapons. My wife beats me and I got arrested on false accusations of hitting her back. I got married to my wife when I was 19 and adopted her 2 kids when it happened." I'm a 21-year-old girl who just wanted to do my job and go home. I don't care about any of this. But in my eyes, I saw that he felt lonely, so I continued to play the part of the listener. Time goes on, and I would see him a couple times a week, and he would take up at least 20 minutes of my time to talk to me. He said a couple of other things to me, but I've honestly tuned him out at this point. He literally does nothing but complain, and more complaining. It's honestly taxing to listen to him. So this is where I become just plain stupid, and I have since then regretted my actions. We were acquainted at this time. I know his name, his wife, and he damn well gave me more information about himself than necessary. So I clock out of work and walk outside. I see old dude. We walk, we talk. Well, he talks, and I just listen. And he suddenly says to me, "I have my phone number if you want. You don't have to accept if I'm creeping you out." I felt obligated and dumbfounded, but I took the damn piece of paper with his number on it. This is a 60-year-old man talking to a 21-year-old girl. I don't call him, but kept the piece of paper in my wallet. At this point in time, I'm not really getting major red flags. It just seems like a lonely old man that wants to talk to someone nice for a change, because he makes it out like the whole world is moving against him and is out for his life. I'm not exaggerating this either. Moving on with the story, I let him have my number, not expecting him to call really. When I get a text, and I quote, since I still have them, "Please help me. I need to talk to you." I panic a bit since this sounds like a cry for help. I call him immediately. The conversation was a bit lost on me because he goes on and on about his wife was beating him and how he has no friends and how I was his only friend. How I'm the most beautiful woman he had ever met, the smartest, the kindest, and blah blah. He was on the phone with me for an hour, and I had to go to bed in a couple hours since I worked the night shift. He called every day, at least once a day. Dude knew my birthday was coming up and called to ask what I would want. I said I didn't care. He asked me about flowers and if I liked them, if I liked jewelry. I didn't care. He then said he wasn't going to call me for the next 3 days, and the next time he would see me, he would give me my gift. Fine, whatever. I hung up. Unfortunately, disaster struck and a family member of mine passed away. Cancer. It's just one of those things. I didn't know him that well, but he was a good, kind-hearted man. I went to the funeral to support my dad since he saw him as a father. I text the old dude to let him know that I can't receive his gift and I was going to go to a funeral. I leave work early to head home and get dressed and ready for the long day when my phone goes off. I got a text message from him saying, "I understand. I need to talk to you. Please call me when you can." I ignored that crap and moved on with my plans. I'm in the middle of the funeral, surrounded by grieving people chatting back and forth, when my phone begins to ring. My heart sinks to the lowest pit of hell when I recognize the ringtone. It was the old dude. I ignore the call and continue with the funeral when he calls again, not even 5 minutes later. I leave the loud room and walk into the hallway, answering the phone angrily and generally pissed off. I say I'm at a funeral and I hang up. He then proceeds to call me and text me one last time during the day. That was a total of 3 calls while I was at a funeral. Normally, people would respect other people's privacy when things like death happen. I turn off my phone. I get back home, and I call dude to see what the hell was going on, and he doesn't answer back. The next day he calls me, moans and groans about how he had the worst day of his life, how his wife slapped him across his face and stuff. I'm sorry about the abuse, but I honestly don't really believe him at this point. He goes on for an hour when he says something that broke my sympathy for him. If I was younger, I would ask you to be my wife. What? It's true. I would want to take you ice skating, show you out to the town, and treat you like the lady you are. That's something you just don't say to a 22-year-old girl. I was at wit's end with this man. I'm done. So my birthday rolls around, and he texts me twice. Please call me anytime you can, and let me know how your birthday went, and what you got for your birthday. Love me. Will you please go skating tomorrow morning, please? Let me know, please, for our birthdays. I wish I was lying about these texts. That was the last text I got from him, and I told him in person to lose my number. He said he understood, but he still called me at least 2 more times and talked to me on the phone for an hour, talking about how he would love to teach me karate and how I needed to defend myself, how I needed to prepare to take a life if necessary. Like, he goes into gruesome detail about what he would do to them. I freaking block his number as soon as he hangs up. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. Now we get to today. I saw him out of the corner of my eye, slowly lumbering over to me. I greeted him, but kept on working. He talked to me for at least 20 minutes. During the time, he bought a vase of roses and gave them to me. It was around that time that the store manager saw how long I was talking to him and came over to break it up. Dude walks away, and the store manager looks at me, clearly concerned, and asked me if I was okay. I told her I was fine, and that he was harmless. She told me not to talk to him for that long anymore, and that I need to do my job and leave. I understood where she was coming from. So the store manager leaves, and I get back to work. Minutes away from leaving, when another employee walks up. He also knows of the old dude, and I talked to him before. He told me that old dude had been kicked out of the store before for inappropriate comments to other female workers. He says he's got my back if I need to escape from dude, and I thanked him for his concern. So here I am, seconds away from leaving, and staring at the roses in my cart. Yeah, I'm definitely throwing those away, I said to myself, heading back to the break room. I run into 2 employees, just when I'm about to toss the roses. My employee asks me what's wrong with them, and I say, I got them from an unwanted guest. It was in an instant that she knew who I was talking about. That dirty old man, she said. Clearly, a lot of people in the store knew about him. I offered the rose to my other coworker to get them off my hands, and she gladly takes them, saying to come to her if he bugs me again. So I'm flower free, and the phone number is blocked. I drive home and realize that I need to tell my dad about this. So I tell him the truth. Not about all the phone calls, since I'm a coward, but enough for him to become concerned. I gave him the piece of paper with his number on it. Needless to say, my dad's keeping a calm and keen eye on the horizon while polishing his guns at the moment. Update. It's only been a day since I posted the story, and I got one more thing to say. He came back today and walked up to me. I didn't even look at him. I got you into trouble yesterday, didn't I? I immediately said, yes you did, still refusing to look at him. I didn't mean to do that. I'm sorry. And that was it. He said that and left right after. What do you guys think? I believe he's harmless, just doesn't know his boundaries well. Second update. Oh boy, he came in again for the 4th day in a row. This is definitely obsessive behavior. No one goes to the grocery store for 4 days in a row. He came in again and gave me a card, apologizing for getting me in trouble the other day. It read, I'm sorry I got you into trouble. I hate it worse if I can't talk to you anymore. Please call me. You're my only friend. I don't want to lose you as a friend. I love talking to you every morning. You make my day. I'll be on my best behavior. Please call me. I let this whole thing drag on way too long. I gotta end it now before my parents become full-fledged mama bear and papa bear mode. So this is the final update. I guess I can finally put this whole stupid ordeal behind me now. I know I was stupid, but what else is new? So I told my boss about what happened, and naturally, he took it very serious. I showed him the card and everything, and he said he would handle it. So some time passed, and I still see the guy every so often, ignoring him like I'm supposed to do. I told my boss that the old dude was inside the store and he literally went hunting for him, going up and down the aisles trying to find him. But no luck. I guess the dude left. The next time I saw him was more comical, really. I was talking to my boss about whatever, and I gestured to a pallet behind me that I had to start on. I was casually looking over my shoulder, and the old dude was standing right behind me. I made a weird gasping sound and spun back around, eyes wide, a bit caught off guard. I don't know if he was pretending to look for something. My boss picked up on it right away and said, "Is that him?" "Yep." "I'll talk to him." My boss went towards the guy, and I walked away, wanting nothing to do with it. A couple of minutes later, my boss found me again and said that him and the old dude had a small chat. Nothing bad. He basically told the old dude that he was making me uncomfortable and he needs to leave me alone. Things like that. Where to begin? I'll just start back to literally last month. So I started working with this guy, who for the sake of the story, I'll call him Bob. Bob is a kind person. I unleashed my full throttle of sarcasm on. Making fun of him just made me feel better, but he seemed to like it. Little did I know that he liked it a lot. I just thought he likes being made fun of, so no harm done, right? Well, if I had been right, I wouldn't be writing this. To be clear, I only thought of him as just being a friend, never anything more than that. Bob is 34, and I'm 22. Hopefully you figured out that I'm a female by now. He also has 2 kids and 2 ex-wives. One of them is our co-worker, who works in a different department. Bob starts bringing food in and candy for me and my co-workers. It made me feel weird, but he keeps insisting that it's just his way of being nice to everyone. Anyways, we become friends on Facebook, and he kept messaging me via Messenger and wanting to talk to me. I'm not always in the mood to talk to people, and sometimes I'm busy, and when I wouldn't respond to him, he would get all moody and upset. He started saying things like, "You're mad at me? Whatever I did, I'm sorry." And at work, when I didn't want to talk to him, he'd act all weird and moody. He offers to buy me my own pizza, which makes me feel extremely weird. But I just let it go, since he ended up getting me one. I mean, Bob is just too nerdy, but I just thought I was being too mean and judgmental, so I kept talking to him every now and then. As time goes on, obviously less and less, because I start to feel like he has feelings for me. But I start to second guess myself, and just think I'm crazy. I still only thought of him as just a friend, a fellow coworker friend. So, the minute my boss got transferred to manage a different department of the company, I find out that Bob is my new boss. Bob messaged me that same weekend, and I'm shocked and feel compromised because of the new position he just put me in. And of course, he didn't think of what kind of position he put me in, because all he was thinking about was himself and his wants and desires. So this is my horror story of how I got unwanted attention from my boss. P.S. I blocked him, and he has no way of contacting me unless it's face to face. All of my coworkers, which are male, are aware of the situation and have seen the messages. I'm not a vindictive person, and I don't want to ruin his life, but what he did I consider strike 2, and if he does it again, I will go to HR. I'm gonna keep my distance, and if I'm around him, I keep a coworker with me, and he seems to have gotten the message. Update. He wouldn't let it go. He kept messaging me over and over again, and I had no choice but to go to HR. He kept on giving me the hard jobs, as if he was punishing me, and he would still message me and get mad when I didn't message him back. I finally talked to my friends and decided to go to HR. They ended up not doing anything. He still has his job, and I basically had to switch departments to get away from him. I might look for a new job. Back in the summer of 2010, I fell victim to unexpected predators. Predators so unexpected, I can hardly believe it really happened when I look back on it. It was a type of experience that made me question whether or not I would survive. I was out late with my boyfriend, Richie. We were both 17 or 18 years old and had just graduated trade school, where we also met. We were living together on our own. We were living our best lives, no matter how little money we had. We loved spending most nights with one of our best friends at the time. His name was Daniel. Most nights we spent with Daniel were filled with late night drives, munchie runs, and video game sleepovers. We always had fun, just laughing and being dumb kids. We didn't really party or surround ourselves with drama or drugs. We did, however, like to drink once in a while. I don't approve of underage drinking at all now, but I know it happens. It is reality. This particular night, we had done what we did most nights. We drove around in Daniel's black, two-door Honda Civic. We were listening to Skrillex, blasting it all the way up. We decided to go to the grocery store to pick up some snacks and some wine coolers. At the time, I was texting my best girlfriend, Charlotte. It was around 7 p.m., and I missed her so much, so I asked her if she wanted us to go pick her up. She was off work and said, "Yes, absolutely." "Charlotte wants to hang out with us," I told Daniel. "Alright, we'll go get her. Tell her we're on our way." So I texted Charlotte and told her to get ready soon. I couldn't wait to see her. It had been weeks since I last seen her, and I knew that she missed me too. We did still talk every day, but seeing her is the best thing. We had talked about a new album by the band Red. She said her brother had bought it, and she said she wanted me to listen to it. I asked her to ask her brother if it was okay if I borrowed it, and he agreed, so I told her not to forget it when I picked her up. We arrived at her place around 7:30, and she lives in a mobile home community, pretty close to where we were picking up our snacks and drinks. I texted her, letting her know that we had arrived, and she came out of her place about 2 minutes later. She got in the car and we headed to Daniel's house. When we arrived, I realized that I left my wallet and the Red album in the car. I thought, it's fine, I'll get that stuff later. We sat in the kitchen and started drinking and eating some munchies. I had actually started to feel sick earlier that day, so I only drank one wine cooler. The night went well. As it progressed, we sat around talking and enjoying the night. Around 11 p.m., Charlotte all of a sudden said, "Shit, my coworker just texted me and asked me to cover her shift tomorrow morning." "No, don't leave us," I interrupted, laughing. She laughed and said, "I want to stay, but I need the extra cash." We tried to convince her to stay, but she asked if we could take her home. Daniel was really drunk at this point. I had my learner's permit at the time, so I offered to drive since I was the only one sober. I figured it would also make good driving practice. So we proceeded to load up in the car, and I headed carefully to drop off Charlotte. We listened to music as always on the way, and laughed about how drunk Daniel was. He wasn't puking or anything, but he was saying many funny things. This is a great night, I remember thinking. We finally get to Charlotte's house, and I park in her driveway. We say our goodbyes and she got out of the car. I stayed in the driveway until I saw that she made it into her place safely. I was by no means professional at driving at this time, so I drove all the way up the street in the opposite direction we came in, so I can just turn around at the next street and make a wide turn to drive back in the opposite direction again. I was terrible at adjusting cars. Let's just say I really needed the most practice making turns and parking. When I finally turned the car around to drive in the opposite direction, I realized I positioned the car too close to another car that was parked on the street. So I pressed the brake pedal, proceeded to try to reverse away from the car I parked too close to. Just as I put the car in reverse, we all gasped as we saw a small, gray, and very shitty looking pickup reverse very quickly in front of us. I panicked a little because it was abrupt. I thought for sure that they were going to hit us. The truck stopped, and I expected the driver to reposition the truck and drive away. I was very wrong. All of a sudden, two young Hispanic guys, who appeared to be in their late teens or early 20s, jumped quickly out of the truck and ran towards the Honda. I froze. I couldn't process what was happening. But one of them came to my side of the car, the other to the passenger side, where Richie was sitting. I didn't know that the car was unlocked. I regret not locking the doors because as soon as they got to the car, they opened the door and started yelling at us to get the hell out of the car. They made us get out, in the fear and panic that was upon us. When I got out of the car, I looked at this guy in front of me. I felt the worst fear I had ever felt in my life. I looked into his eyes and could tell he was high or something. I saw so much hatred and anger in his eyes. I knew this guy was out to hurt someone. I made it a point not to make too much eye contact, but made sure I got a good look at him. He was about 5 foot 6 inches tall. He was thin, tan skin, and short spiky brown hair. He was wearing skinny light blue jeans and a blue plaid long sleeve shirt. On his face sat a round set of glasses with light blue tint. I didn't get a good look at the other guy because I was fixated on the threat in front of me. I just remember he had dark hair and it was about the same height as the other guy. I was so scared I didn't even know what was going on. All I could hear was, "What the fuck are you doing at my girl's house?" Pointed at Daniel and loudly asked, "My girl's cheating on me with this fucker? Claudia's with this fucker?" At the moment, he and the other guy started going through the car. They took my wallet and the red album and threw it out on the street. I whimpered in reply, "No, we just dropped off a friend. We don't know any Claudia." He replied loud and aggressive, "Which friend? You're lying." I didn't want to give up my best friend's name, obviously, so I responded, "Maria. We came to drop off my friend Maria. We don't know a Claudia. Please leave us alone." I was terrified and careful about what I said or did because I didn't know if they had any weapons. I know we all had the same thought because we were all trying to remain calm. I didn't try anything, even though I didn't see any weapons. In my head, I knew it was a possibility, so I tried to remain calm. Before I knew it, the spiky guy grabbed my arm and started to lead me up the street. He said, "All right, take me to your house then. I want to talk to Maria," he said calmly. "Okay, I'll take you and show you. I'll prove to you that we don't know Claudia." We walked a few feet in silence, dozens of things going through my head. I was not about to lead him to Charlotte. I thought about running for it. I thought about pleading with him. I had no idea what to do. I turned around to try to assure him again. I said, "I really don't know Claudia." He didn't say anything. He just looked at me and looked back at his friend that he had left with Richie and Daniel. I guess he decided better and didn't want to leave his partner behind, because he left me alone on the street and took off running back down the street to the other guys. I took the opportunity to run behind one of the mobile homes and try to get back closer to the car. I thought about asking one of the neighbors to call the cops, but I was hesitant because, after all, it was really late at night and I probably wouldn't get an answer, or maybe if I did, I would just get the door slammed on my face. Just then, as I ran farther down the houses, through the back, I saw Daniel turn the corner and headed towards me. "Where's Richie?" I frantically asked. "I don't know. We both came looking for you." Richie then appeared behind the mobile homes too, and we were just so thankful to see each other. We peered around the mobile homes and decided it was safe to go back to the car. We ran fast. I ran so fast I could feel my pants falling off. I jumped into the back seat of the car without hesitation. Daniel had sobered up by the end of all that and decided to drive home. We were all so shocked, angry, and scared that we just all knew what to do and how to position ourselves in the car. I asked them what happened while I was by myself. They said they squared up with the guys. They fist fought for a couple of minutes and the other guys took off on foot. Richie said he didn't even get hit. He said that the guy looked like he was either high or drunk. We drove back to Daniel's house. We called the cops on the way there. They arrived 10 minutes later. I was shooken up. I was crying, and my stomach felt like it was turned upside down. The cops took all our statements. They said that they'll do their best to get this solved, but we never heard anything back about the incident. Nobody blamed me for it, but I had several regrets. I thought it was my fault for not locking the door. I thought how stupid it was that I froze up. I didn't know what I was going to do when the spiky-haired guy took me alone up the street. I was terrified of what he had in mind to do with me. I didn't know those guys. I didn't know their intentions or motives. I still have no idea who the hell Carla was. I have regrets, but I know it wasn't my fault. We were all so young and hardly had any life experience. It taught us a lot. I'm just happy and now thank God that nothing worse happened. It's not my fault, and those guys shouldn't have done what they did to us. Well, I don't blame myself anymore. I think we just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. For a while, I worked the front desk at a retirement home. My shift was from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m., basically the black of night. The retirement home was nice, 3 stories, and the people lived on their own apartments and had maids to clean up after them. There was a restaurant inside that served the residents meals. Everything was nice and new. There was even an atrium in the middle of the building that had plants, water features, and a big jacuzzi. My job was to be at the front desk in case anyone needed help. Part of my job was also to walk the floors at night, just in case one of the oldsters needed anything, and to make sure the outside doors were all shut. It took me about 20 minutes to walk each floor. I had to walk the circuit at least 3 times on each floor, but it was up to me when to do the intervals. After I finished the circuit, I would go back down to the first floor where I could watch TV or read until it was time to make another round. I didn't particularly like being the only person awake in that building in the wee hours. I would have to go into the back of the building and check some of the doors, and that made me feel uncomfortable. One night, I was sitting on the couch in the first floor lobby, and I thought I saw one of the residents walking across the atrium like he was drunk. Sometimes residents would bring liquor into the atrium, which was okay as long as it wasn't in a glass bottle. I didn't have a good vantage point of the atrium, with all the dense foliage and my angle from where I was sitting. I got up and entered the atrium from the south door. I looked around just in case someone needed help, but I was the only person in there. I went back to the first floor lobby couch and started watching TV again. I couldn't concentrate on it though. I kept thinking of the atrium. Something about it was bothering me. I decided just to make one more circuit of the building. I got in the elevator and went to the top floor and started my walk. All quiet. I then used the back stairs to get down to the second floor. Also quiet. Except for one of the residents running their TV very loudly. But no one had complained, so there was no need to knock on the door. I was almost back into the elevator when I looked over the side of the atrium. I saw someone in yellow swim trunks. I wasn't alarmed. I figured one of the residents was taking a late dip in the jacuzzi. Supposedly the jacuzzi wasn't to be ran after midnight. But hey, they were adults, so I wasn't going to give them a hard case about it. It was getting near 4 a.m., and I could barely keep my eyes open. I turned on the TV and sat down at the desk to do some paperwork, anything to keep me from nodding off. While I was sitting there, I saw someone walk across the atrium from the south side to the north side, just like before. Okay, now I'm getting a little pissed. Sometimes the residents have a little fun with the staff. Also, some of these old birds and cats were getting it on at their age, and there had been some crazy things happening, especially when they brought out the booze. At some point, after 4 a.m., I fell asleep at the desk. I was startled awake a few minutes later when I heard some commotion in the atrium. I jerked awake just in time to see one of the residents run across the atrium to the other side. I only saw him for a second, but he had on the yellow swim trunks. I couldn't see where he went, but I could see that the north side door was propped up with one of the rocks that decorated the atrium. Propping the door open like this was certainly odd. Okay, fun games, people, I thought. Playtime is over. I got up and went to the south side atrium door. The door was stuck. I yanked on it, but it didn't budge. So I had to scurry all the way to the other side of the atrium to enter through the prop door on the north side. As I stepped into the atrium, I could hear that the jacuzzi was on the highest setting, and it was absolutely roaring. There was about a dozen beer cans on the cool decks. I marched over the fake bridge that spanned fake rocks over the river that was on the middle of the atrium. There was someone in the jacuzzi alright, but he was face down in the water. I jumped in and grabbed his arm to turn him over and start CPR, but it was already too late. He was non-responsive. I yelled for help, but the residents couldn't hear me. Most of them were hard of hearing. I tried to haul him up the jacuzzi steps, but couldn't move him much, since he was twice my weight. I ran to the lobby phone. He had jammed the south side door open with some more big rocks, so I had to run fast to get to the lobby so I could call 911. The EMT showed up quickly, but my resident had set up his suicide very well. After the autopsy, the resident starter told us that he had 5 times the amount of alcohol of those 12 beer cans in his blood. I was pissed off that he played cat and mouse with me all night and left me to clean up the mess. And on the other hand, I felt guilty that I wasn't able to intrude on what he was up to. I blamed myself a lot for a long time. Also, if you've never been with a corpse alone in the dead of night, I can attest that it is increasingly horrific. I spent time working at a mental health unit for a private care home. There are always loads of stories of eerie things going on, and I never believed them. There are a couple of times I was freaked out though. Part of the job was to patrol the corridors, checking that the residents were asleep and in their beds. An important bit of info which is relevant is that the unit that I worked on was classed as a challenging behavior unit, basically violent or aggressive residents. The unit had been built for 40 residents, but because of the nature of the clients, the most they ever had was about 14. This meant that the place was mainly empty. One night I was doing a check on my own at about 3 a.m. I had pretty much finished my rounds and was about to head back to the lounge to continue watching TV in an attempt to keep myself awake. As I was heading back, I heard a bump noise and some muttering down one of the corridors. Thinking it was a resident, I walked towards the noise. It seemed to be coming from room 40, which hadn't had a resident in it for years. I was on my own. All the other staff were in the lounge. I didn't recognize the voice, and as I got to the room, I heard a loud bang. I opened the door and went in. It was a pitch black empty room, perfectly tidy with no one else in there. I freaked out and checked every room on the way back again. Chatting with the staff a few weeks later, they asked if anything eerie had happened to me yet. Playing it down, I said no. But it turns out room 40 was supposedly haunted after a member of the staff was fatally wounded there by a resident. I never told anyone at work about the incident, but it freaked me out. On a side note, not quite night shift, but eerie nonetheless. I was called into an emergency day shift. A resident was dying, and they needed extra staff to cover the floor while staff tended to the resident in his last moments. There was a call system in the building, like a hospital, which links to the pagers that the staff have to respond to. Each room has one, and the pagers allow you to see who's calling and if it's an emergency. Anyway, the resident passed away, and it was quietly told to the staff while they sorted the funeral details with the family. I was sitting in a lounge when the pager system went off for his room. Thinking the staff needed help or supplies, I went into the room. I popped my head around the door to be told that they didn't page anyone. I checked my pager, and it was his room that was calling. I reset the system and left. This happened 3 more times after that, each time within minutes of my leaving. Eventually, on the last time, I went to take the batteries out of the call system. A few minutes later, his room went off again. I still had the batteries in my pockets. We were all freaked out a little by this, so I went back one more time. The nurse that was dealing with the resident was shocked to hear what was happening. Even when I showed her the pager, saying it was a room calling, she paused and turned to the deceased. She knelt down next to him and said, in the most soothing voice ever, "It's okay, Bob. You can rest now. We'll be here for you if you need us." The alarm never went off again while he was there. We put the batteries back in after he left and the system was fine. Never had a fault again, or never went off unexpectedly again. So I'm not sure how many people know what FetLife is, but basically it's a fetish BDSM social media site. Facebook for those into kink, basically. It was used a lot for hookups, dating, but I was primarily into it to read some short erotica that were posted in forums sometimes, and finding more like-minded friends. But I did eventually branch out and meet some people off of there. Most of them were really cool. Others, not so much. They were just kind of boring. All in all, it was pretty okay. But after talking to this one guy and meeting up with him only once, I got really bad vibes and decided not to go any further. He just creeped me out for some reason. He was not ready to give up. Things went quiet for a while, and then 2 weeks later I kept getting harassing messages from blank accounts that I'm assuming were his, as they all had different variations of the same screen name, but words and letters arranged in different order. They were pretty harmless things like, "Why don't you love me? I thought we had something special. Hello? Please talk to me." Things of that nature. Annoying, but not dangerous. Well, one day he shows up to my work. Now I did work at a McDonald's, so it isn't that weird. And luckily I work in the back at the drive-thru. I only really saw him out of the corner of my eye when I went up to the front to grab cups, and I don't think he recognized me. I had shaved my head. It was trendy at the time, and when I met him I had a wig on. I never told him that I had shaved my head either. But as I was walking back, he called out my name. I rushed into the back and told my manager, and he got asked to leave. I didn't see or hear from him for 2 weeks afterwards. I get another message from a totally new unnamed account, but this one was much more sinister, and I knew it was him. It had to be. When he found out I was dating someone new, he got angry and threatened to expose me. I didn't work at McDonald's, so he didn't know where I worked anymore, but he knew where I went to school, the names of my mother and sister, and knew where they worked. He knows what shops I shop at, which friends I hang out with the most. He didn't know her name, but he gave me a really detailed description of how she looked. And he says that he knows where I live. Luckily, nothing happened, and I moved soon after. I never heard from him again. But needless to say, I was very spooked out, and it scared me away from online dating for good. I made a police report, so maybe that scared him away. I work at a family-owned restaurant as a counter girl. My job is fairly easy, and when I turned 16 years old, they allowed me to become a closer. Which shouldn't be the name, since closing counter girls leave an hour before actual closing time. One night, 3 well-dressed and fit men came in. They were buff, over 6'3" at least, dressed in fitted suits with nice jewelry on. And I can't lie, they were very attractive. One of them came to the counter while my coworkers weren't around and asked for my number. I proceeded to tell them how young I was. He continued on with it and said, "Just delete the messages." I got his number and began texting him and felt relief that he told me that he was on a business trip and he actually lives in Texas and is leaving in 4 days. Those next 4 days, since I refused to go to his place, he was coming in every night to get food. I didn't mind it at first, but each day he came with a different man. When he told me he was only on a trip with the 2 men from the first meeting. By the time the 3rd or 4th day rolled around, my closing shift ended at 11, since it was a Saturday night. He came in again, this time with even taller and bigger men. I'm talking gigantic muscle men, which was very unnerving. It was about 10:15 or so, and he said, "You guys close at 12, right? So you're off soon, huh?" And I just smiled and nodded at him and cashed him out. I went about my usual business, and around 10:55, when I went to put stuff in the dish room before clocking out, something caught my eye outside the little kitchen window. It was this fucking guy inside his rental white Challenger with a black stripe. I recognized it clear as day, since he boasted about it upon our first meeting. Sure enough, when I walk up to the window, they were in there waiting. At this time, I recently turned 16 and didn't have my license just yet, so my sister was picking me up. She parked fairly far away, past where they were, and there were no streetlights on or anything. I was starting to become nauseous. I immediately started panicking, and my waitress noticed. I told her everything, and she had me call my sister to pull up to the door. And I told her, "Please don't go outside, Vanessa. Let me go on my own." The last thing I wanted was for her to get hurt. But she's a mother, and she denied what I said and walked me out and made sure I got into the car and locked the doors. Once I got in, I didn't even buckle, and I said to my sister, "You need to drive, and you need not to drive home." My gut was telling me something, and it wasn't nice. My sister, obviously confused and getting freaked out, but did what I asked. I noticed them following, but she had lost them. To this day, I'm grateful for the waitress for helping me and my sister for acting quickly and not stopping to ask questions. I don't know what would have happened if I left on my own. Many years ago, I was a technical writer for a state office. My office was half of what had been an interrogation room for the Attorney General at one time. Since then, millions had been spent in renovations for the building, which had been built in the 1880s. It may have looked shiny and new, but it had some old residents left from before the renovations. I was working late and was sitting at my desk, which was U-shaped, with the center being the only open area for my office. A coworker came in, and the two of us were sitting there, at each end of the U, making revisions on a document together. Suddenly I felt like someone was in the office with us, but there wasn't anyone. The door was to our backs, but it felt like someone was on the other end of the U curved part, where my computer was. No one could have gotten there without walking through us. As we look at the spot where it seemed like someone was standing, the cord to my desk phone lifted, and it looked like someone had dropped it off the edge of my desk. I looked at my coworker and she looked at me, and then we looked back at the phone cord. It was swinging back and forth, then suddenly it stopped in the dead center, as if someone put their hands out and held it there. It totally stopped swinging. She said, "Did you see that?" and ran out of the office. I left, took a walk, and went back to work a little bit later. What else was I gonna do? About a week later, I was at work late again. This time, I'm sitting at the bottom of the U, at my computer. Off to my left, I had a stack of papers, maybe 10 or 12 pages, and my glasses were laying on top of them. There was nothing near them, no air conditioning vents, and they were out of my reach. However, as I was typing, out of the corner of my eye, I saw some movement. I turned my head just in time to see the pile of papers with my glasses on top of them slide about 6 inches down my desk. Other things had happened over the years, but these were the two that stood out most in my mind. For a bit of background information, I'm a guy from Mississippi, and I was around 19 at the time this took place. I lived in a small trailer with my dad and brother for the first 16 years of my life, before my brother, who I'll call Gunner, moved out due to him and my father always fighting. After my brother moved out, my father and I moved a county away, therefore the trailer was left vacant. A couple years later, I started dating this girl, who we'll call Chelsea, and my brother was dating her sister, who we'll call Mariah. We all decided to move into the vacant trailer because at the time, there was no other option. We needed a place to stay fast, and that was our option. Keep in mind, at the time, my girlfriend had 2 kids, and Mariah had 4. This is where the story begins. My brother had, and still has a meth addiction, and it causes him to be violent and aggressive when he's high. The entire time he and Mariah were together, they would non-stop argue and fight. Several times it became physical, and the police were called. All in all, the police were called 8 times while we lived together. Anyway, the first big event happened around Christmas of 2017. My brother had been high for 4 days and was trying to start an argument with Mariah just to get an altercation started. This is how he was when he was high. Tensions rose, and he wanted to take their 6-month-old son away and stay at her grandparents' house a quarter-mile down the road. Mariah wasn't going to let him take him in this condition, so Gunner grabs one of his hunting rifles from my room and puts everyone at gunpoint and says, and I quote, "If anyone tries to take Cody away from me, I'll fucking kill you." At this point, everyone froze in fear. He was standing there with a 6-month-old baby in his arm and a .308 caliber rifle in the other, pointing at me, Chelsea, Mariah, and the 5 other children. He then leaves out the back door and proceeds to walk to my grandparents' house in 30-degree weather with a 6-month-old baby with just a blanket. Chelsea and I drive down to my grandparents' house and end up calming him down long enough to convince him to give back Cody so we can get him home and make sure that he is safe and everyone else is safe. Not even 5 minutes later, my dad is pulling into the driveway where my brother was at to see what was going on. At the time, I was in the bathroom pissing, and when I walked out of the bathroom, my brother walks up to me so high that he pushes me onto the ground for no reason. For some reason, this just flips a switch. I get up, ready to fight, and my dad gets behind Gunner and puts him in the chokehold. Keep in mind, my dad is a big guy, around 5'11", but husky and strong. My brother is also 5'10", husky and strong as well, but he had his youth to his advantage, so my dad wasn't able to keep hold of him for long. I'm only 5'6", around 130 pounds. So while my dad is restraining my brother, I take the opportunity to punch my brother in the ribs as hard as I can, while I can. I mean, come on. What else are you going to do when you're this small in comparison? My brother finally breaks free and starts to swing on me. By a miracle, he never lands a punch, and I get out of there, and my father is able to subdue him without anyone getting hurt. He ended up just talking some shit and leaving with my father. The next incident happened a couple months after, around February. By the way, Mariah was still together with Gunner after everything that happened for some reason. I was at H&R Block filing my taxes when I get a call from Mariah, panicking, saying my brother had just beat the shit out of her and was cutting himself with a knife, telling me I needed to come home right away. I ended up getting home about 20 minutes later to find Mariah with a swollen face and my brother nowhere to be found. He came back about 10 minutes later and was wanting to get his belongings. I sat on the porch when he asked me if I would help him get his stuff. I told him, "Fuck no. Look what you did to Mariah's face." All of a sudden, he started swinging on me, and when I got up from the chair, he pulled my hoodie over my head like a pussy, and I ended up pushing him off the porch. When I got my hoodie off, my uncle that had brought him to the house made him get in the truck and leave before the cops got there. Mariah made a report to the cops, but she didn't press charges because they told her that she would have to go to jail too because of domestic violence. Yeah, sounds stupid, right? A couple weeks later, Mariah, Chelsea, and I were sitting at home, and Mariah asked if I would drive her down the road to get some weed. We lived in the back roads, where we had a weed dealer about a mile away. As we are driving to his house, we see my brother in someone's yard. Mariah wants to be petty, so she honked the horn as we pass. We pull up to the weed guy's house, and she gets her sack, and when we pull out of the driveway, we see my brother in my grandma's car coming downhill towards us. He gets about 50 feet away and swerves over into our lane. Thinking he was just trying to fuck with us, we think nothing about it until he's about 10 feet away and never gets over, so I hit the ditch to avoid him. He ends up swiping the car and pulls over and gets out and tries to pull me out of the car. We ended up going home to call the police because I had left my phone there, and the police couldn't do anything about it since we technically left the scene of an accident. I know, cops in my area are rather useless. We ended up totaling my grandma's car and completely fucking up the doors. My grandparents ended up giving me the car he totaled because my car was the exact same model as theirs and I could use their parts if I needed it. One day, while I was at work, my brother goes down to my house and takes the piece of steel and smashes out the windows of the car and even destroyed my mailbox. Once again, the cops didn't do shit about it. For the next couple weeks, my brother would send texts to Mariah saying that he's watching her, and would even stay at the cemetery across the road from my house and watch us at like 3 in the morning just to see who came over. My brother was the type of guy that couldn't stand anyone being with his ex. He went as far to sneak into the house in broad daylight while Chelsea and I were at work, and he left a note saying, "For Mariah, I'm watching you," while she took a nap with the kids. If you're wondering, our doors didn't really lock. That's how he got in. About a month later, Mariah gets back together with her ex-boyfriend and baby daddy to her other kids, and we'll call him Ricky. One morning, Chelsea and I leave for work at 6 a.m. and get about 20 minutes down the road when Mariah calls us, telling us that we need to come home because Gunnar had snuck down to our house through the woods around 10 or 11 o'clock at night and stayed in one of the vehicles all night waiting for us to leave so he could get inside and fight Ricky. Apparently, he tried to pull Ricky out of bed, but couldn't because he had a hold of the end of the bed. When he realized he couldn't, he started talking shit, and while this was all going on, Mariah snuck out to call the police. The police came but didn't do anything because my brother told him that the trailer belonged to my dad and that he had the right to be there. A couple days go by, and all of a sudden out of nowhere, Gunnar stops by with my 2 uncles, while Chelsea, Ricky, and I are at home watching TV. He starts spouting off stuff to get Ricky to come outside to fight him. So Ricky puts on his boots and walks outside. As soon as he does, Gunnar grabs him by the throat and drives him into the kids' playhouse on the porch. I go behind Gunnar and pull him off, and when I do, Ricky gets up and starts throwing punches at Gunnar, landing a couple. They end up on the ground with Ricky wrapped around Gunnar, choking him until my uncles pulled them apart. Gunnar gets in the truck, still mouthing off as they are leaving, and is visibly pissed when he sees that his head is all bruised up from getting tagged. The next day, Ricky drives down to my grandparents because the kids had told him that Mariah had gone down there to see Gunnar. I know, Mariah is absolutely stupid. He pulls up and Gunnar is telling him to leave and that this is his house. Ricky says he isn't leaving until Mariah comes outside. Gunnar says he's going to hit him in the head with the metal folding chair that was sitting on the porch. Ricky tries to call his bluff and walks up to him, and Gunnar hits him, dropping him to the ground. Gunnar gets on top of him and starts beating him until my grandpa comes outside and makes him get off. He comes home later with a couple of bruises, but nothing too serious. A couple days later, Mariah and Gunnar get into another fight because Gunnar was apparently cheating on her, and things escalated very quickly. Long story short, Gunnar is chasing after Mariah on a four-wheeler, shooting at her with a pistol while she is in the truck with her son. Like every time before, the cops didn't do shit. Mariah finally wised up and moved in with her mom to get away from Gunnar. And the day after she moved, Chelsea and I were working and came home to find our TV had been stolen. Mariah came back down to the trailer the next day to get the rest of her stuff when my brother saw her and stopped by to start another altercation. Things escalated again. Gunnar took the keys to Mariah's mother's car and threw them into the field next to our house. She jumped into the car and locked herself in there, trying to keep him from attacking her. My brother took a brick that was laying on the ground and tried to smash the window out. Somehow, by some miracle, the window never broke, so he decided to beat up the car instead. After he got tired, he finally left, and when we got off work, we searched the field by our house for 2 hours trying to find the keys. We never did, so the car was towed, which cost $100. Mariah's mother pressed charges, and he was charged with destruction of property, over $500 worth of damage, which made it a felony. The next day our air conditioners got stolen while we were at work, so that drew the line for us. We moved into one of our co-workers' house the next night, and after that, the problems with my brother stopped. We were finally able to sleep at night, knowing Gunnar wouldn't bother us anymore. Now it's 2020, and my brother has a warrant out for his arrest for not seeing his probation officer. It's bad to say, I honestly hope he goes to prison, so he stays away from us, because a year after we moved, we ran into him a couple times, and he was nothing but trouble both those times. I'm sure I missed some things, but that's the majority of it. The story might not seem as scary as others you hear, but it was a nightmare to experience it firsthand. Some nights I laid awake, afraid to go to sleep, in fear of my brother coming in and killing us in our sleep. Things had gotten that bad. For anyone thinking about trying meth, please don't ever do it. It will completely ruin your life in a heartbeat and make you lose everything. Take it from experience. It's not worth it. This happened a few months ago. I was at a club for my friend's birthday, and we had a table with around a dozen friends with us. When we get there, a guy immediately starts hitting on me. He seemed super weird, and I had a boyfriend, so I politely declined his advances. Then shit got weird. While out, I feel like I see him everywhere, and it started to freak me out a bit, but at the time I didn't have a sense of any danger. Fast forward an hour. I'm chatting with a friend from high school who happened to be the bartender. Creepy guy comes up and orders a drink for him and myself, which I declined, and explained to my bartender friend that we already have a table, so I'm good on drinks. Creepy guy did not like that. He gave me shit about not accepting his offer and that he was just trying to be nice. However, during his nice guy speech, he picked up my drink to refill it, which I again declined and asked him to excuse me while I chatted with my friend. I finished my drink, the one he picked up earlier, and finished it without thinking much more of the creeper. About 30 minutes later, I become sick and disoriented, and I had my friend help me to the restroom since I felt so dizzy. After a while, I felt sick again, and my female friend was nowhere to be seen, so I walked myself to the bathroom. While waiting at the door, the creeper swooped in and held on to my waist very tight and asked if I wanted to come to his table upstairs to meet his friends. I kept telling him no, that I needed to go back to my friends, and he began dragging me towards the stairs, telling me a list of disgusting perverse things that I refused to write here. At that point, I was terrified, but my legs literally did not work. He was carrying me up the stairs. As soon as he got up there, he requested his valet to go home. At this point, I knew I was in danger, but my purse was missing, and so was my phone. While he's waiting outside, the bouncer makes a comment about my behavior, and the creep shrugs it off as too much alcohol. As we are waiting for the valet, 6 of my friends burst out from behind the door and begin screaming at the creeper, while one of the female grabs me and pulls me back inside. I passed out soon after and woke up about 5 p.m. the next day on my friend's couch. I thought I had alcohol poisoning until I went to the emergency room and found out that I was drugged with ketamine while out the night before. This guy intended to drug me and take me home with him. Since then, I have refused to go out without my boyfriend always around me. I avoid that bar at all costs in case that creeper ever comes back. And I know to watch my drink like a hawk whenever I'm out. A valuable life lesson learned from a terrifying experience. This is the scariest thing that ever happened to me while I was night shift security at a data center. I was just an 18-year-old kid, and my job was to sit in the office all night, alone. This was in the early days of the internet. There was no Facebook or YouTube to kill time. Usually, I took the time to study or practice a guitar, but sometimes I needed a break from that. I decided to photocopy my face, which led to my butt and other parts. I'm the only one in the building, so it's super easy. But then, the paper got jammed after having copied my parts. There was about 1 hour before the early people would start coming in the office. I had no idea how to open this very expensive copier, and there was no manual anywhere. I was pulling the parts off, trying to remember where they came from so I could put it back. No smartphones to just snap a picture and know how to put everything together. I had pulled off and replaced many parts that gave me no access to the jammed paper. There was only 30 minutes before the first people started coming in, and what if someone decided to come in early that day? Long story short, I managed to figure out how to remove the offending jammed copy with literally only 3 minutes before someone came in to the office. This isn't a scary story, but it scared the crap out of me. Okay, so this just happened 15 minutes ago. I'm still shaking from this shit as I type this. I work out of Five Guys, and I had a shift from 5 p.m. to close. We close at 10 p.m., and we're usually there till about 10:45, cleaning up and prepping for the next day. Usually there's one person on dishes, one cleaning, one changing and taking out the trash, and the manager doing paperwork and helping us out. I'm usually on trash because I'm not really good at the other things. The walk to the dumpster is about 75 yards away from the back door through a pitch black alleyway. Tonight, I had an absurd amount of trash to take out, so I was exhausted and just wanted to go home. On the way back from our last trip, my pants started to fall down because I wear them extremely loose at work. I don't know why. I stopped to pull up my pants and turned around to see a man sprinting towards me. My heart stopped, and I jumped like you would jump from a jump scare in a horror movie. I turned around and did a speed walk type of thing because it's like 10:40 at this time and pitch black out. Shit reminded me of the dude from Get Out. Anyways, I turned back around to see what the guy was doing, and he was fucking gone. Gone. Disappeared. At this point, I full on sprinted to the back door. Yeah, that's pretty much all there is to the story. The story's kinda anticlimactic, but it scared the crap out of me. When I was 10, my female cousin and I were dropped off at the movie theater by my mom while she ran some errands in town. We decided to go see a horror movie called The Village. I am tall, so I looked older, and my cousin was 14 at the time. We got super bored and decided to leave, so we got up. We walked out and stood at the entrance of the movies and rang my mother to come pick us up. Not 5 minutes later, a couple, about 40, well dressed, came out, and we recognized them as being in the same movie room as we were. They walked over to us and started asking us questions like, "Why did you guys walk out? Did you not like the movie? How old are you?" We told them that we were bored, and I honestly forgot how old we told them that we were. We also told them that we were waiting for my mom to come pick us up. And they asked, "Do you want to wait for her at our place?" We told them no, and they asked, "Are you sure?" And something else I can't really remember. They then walked away from us, but not out of the movies, and started talking. A few minutes later they come back and asked us again, and then walked out. The dick behind the popcorn counter then said we couldn't wait inside and we had to go outside. It was a really small, crappy place. We told him what happened, and he either didn't believe us or didn't care, because he still made us go. I think there's more to the conversation, but I can't really remember. I think my cousin told them that my mom wouldn't know that we were with them, and they said, "Ring her and tell her," or "We'll ring her and tell her once we get to their house," or something along those lines. Sometimes I wonder if they were genuine, but who asked a pair of kids to go back to their place? My first job as a software engineer was working at Adam Osborne and Associates at the marina. It was 1977, and I was developing simple example programs to run on the earliest microcomputers. I had a lab area with the Radio Shack TRS-80 and an Apple II, a North Star computer, and a few others. We had a small number of employees, maybe 12. One night I was working late, 2 a.m. I was the only staff person in the office. All of a sudden there was a horrendous crash and a thud, and I heard people running in the front door. I went to hide in our little stock room, behind some boxes. Some young thieves had appropriated a concrete utility cover from the sidewalk out front and chucked it through the window pane of our front door. Then they just turned the handle and they were in. Piece of cake. They grabbed 3 IBM typewriters and ran right back out. The whole episode only took 30 seconds, and they roared off in their cars. I never saw the getaway car. I dialed 911 while listening to my heart pounding and waited for the cops to arrive. And that was pretty exciting. Then came the scary part, calling Adam Osborne at home at 3 a.m. and telling him what happened. Forever after, years later, anytime I ran into Adam at a trade show or a show place, he would greet me warmly and remind me of the episode. Being a military camp guard as part of a small detachment, I was frequently assigned to do night patrols around the camp perimeter. For one of the patrols, I was walking along with a partner, wanting to complete the round before I turned in for the night. Walking around the building, we suddenly heard footsteps coming out from the building. We paused and checked our watches. It was 2 a.m. in the morning. We decided to walk around the building, checking every exit. It was a secured building that stored millions of dollars worth of equipment. Each exit was armed with an intrusion detection lock. Each lock was armed. We heard more footsteps and decided to radio back to the guardhouse. "Is there any night ops going on?" "No, everybody in the camp has checked out." The guardhouse holds the keys of the important key presses. When these keys are all turned in, no one except for the essential staff, like camp guards and other personnel on duty, are in camp. There's footsteps in Building X. All locks are red and armed. Advice? Continue with your patrol. We'll check in with duty orderly. The DOS checked the building soon after, and there wasn't anyone around. This was a long time ago. Let's see, about 37 years ago, as of 2016. I worked at a full-service gas station just off the highway around the South Manchester, Connecticut, USA area, just off Highway 84, going towards Hartford. Usually it was pretty quiet at night, but one time we got robbed. The robbers pulled up to the gas pumps in a car. They asked for money in the drawer. One guy had a gun, and the other guy had the gas pump. Somehow, they ended up spraying me with gasoline, and they were flicking a big lighter. They got the money and drove off. I called the police, who in turn called an ambulance. Then I called my parents. Some of my parents beat the ambulance to the hospital, where I had a saline flush to get the gasoline out of my eyes and nostrils. This was one of many interesting nights I had as a teenager working the gas stations, but the risk of being burned by a madman with a lighter while doused in gasoline certainly takes a cake. So today has been slow at work, and I've been killing time reading these stories. Maybe enough time has passed so I can share mine. I had a friend who was really into occult. Unfortunately, I was the one that got him turned on to it. We had a mutual appreciation of the paranormal and all things weird, so I thought the subject would interest him. He started going deep into the subject, to the point where he wouldn't talk about anything else. He would actually interrupt a conversation and force the subject back to occult matters. Rude. But sometimes people go through phases where their interest is all they want to talk about. It was a mostly forgivable offense. I think I should mention that this particular friend didn't have a very large friend circle. His depression and introverted nature kept him inside a lot. He didn't have the best luck in relationships with women. His world was kind of small, and I did enjoy hanging out with him, so I did my best to be a good friend. I didn't want to brush him off because he was acting a little weirder than normal. Honestly, for the longest time, he was a totally normal guy. We'd chat and play games together on PlayStation. Sometimes we'd go see movies with my boyfriend accompanying us. We hung out all the time at the park. We went swimming, and overall had a good time hanging out. Things started to go downhill when he started to smoke DMT. I think psychedelics are amazing tools that can offer insights into your life, but they should be treated with respect. My friend got to the point where he was making it himself, and he was smoking it daily, multiple times a day. For those who aren't familiar with the substance, when you smoke it, you get transformed to a different world, and an entirely new plane of existence. Your body and yourself don't exist anymore. My personal experience with it led me to see a dragon once in this kaleidoscope of a cornucopia. People see all kinds of things on it. Imagine what that does to a person when they smoke it 30 times a day. He started telling me things like he was the reincarnated Osiris. He said that he was seeing hieroglyphics all over the place. Apparently, he had an hour-long conversations with entities in his bedroom, even when he wasn't smoking. Of course, I was very alarmed to hear all of this, and told him that he needed to take a serious break. No drugs at all for a few months, so he could find a solid footing in reality again. At this point, I was still hanging out with him because he obviously needed some help, and like I said before, he didn't have a lot of friends that could give him that. He was also the black sheep of his family, so I knew he wasn't getting any kind of support from them. He was really close to his sister, and I did reach out to her on Facebook to express my concerns. I pushed her to talk to him into getting some psychiatric help, because he was slipping past the point of no return. I'm not really sure if she took my messages seriously, since we didn't really know each other. Plus she is at least 6 years younger than us, and possibly didn't grasp how serious the situation was becoming. In any case, I'll jump forward now to the part that things started to get real creepy. My boyfriend and I had made arrangements to hang out with our friend at the park. I didn't really want to go because I felt like I needed a break from him. I couldn't deal with it on that particular day. My boyfriend said he wasn't all that bad, and we went anyway. We get to the park, and he's his usual self, ranting about Egypt and made up gods that only he knew. He also had a large hunting knife that he kept fiddling with the whole time that we were on the walk. He told us that he had been using it in ceremonial magic, and that it helped him banish negative thoughts. This made me extremely uneasy. He would do this thing where he would take the knife and make stabbing motions near his heart or head, like he was mock stabbing himself, all while holding a conversation with me and my boyfriend. I think we were both on edge and didn't know what to say or do about it. I tried to distract him from doing it by bringing up subjects that might interest him, but he kept on with his ritual. Keep in mind, we're walking on a trail, so it isn't like we could just say goodbye then and there. We had to walk back to our car and drop him off at his car. My boyfriend had the bright idea that we should get some lunch after our walk, even though I was doing my best to give him a look that said, "No, you crazy fuck. Why would you think I would want to spend any more time with this nut?" But it must not have been very effective, or my boyfriend was just ignoring it. Not sure. Either way, we ended up getting to the car and going to lunch. In the car I was driving, my boyfriend was in the passenger seat and our weirdo friend was in the back. As we're heading through the busy part of town, where all the shopping and restaurants are, I hear the distinctive sound of a belt buckle coming undone. Then I hear the worst sound imaginable. I peek back in the corner of my eye, and my suspicions are confirmed. This crazy fucker was full on jacking off in our back seat. I mean, pants way down, bare ass on the seat, beating it so hard like he wanted to rip it off. Instinctively, I felt sick to my stomach, and all the nervous energy I had throughout the day popped up into my head. I was trying not to shake and trying to ignore it and drive through the heavy traffic. I kinda had a freeze response, I guess. The whole time I kept thinking about the huge knife he had in his pocket, and obviously he was completely off his rocker. I was afraid to say anything or confront him because I didn't know how he would react. This part is nuts, but my boyfriend didn't even fucking seem to notice. The whole time he kept rambling on about God knows what. I couldn't listen to him because my thoughts were 100% focused on driving and trying to act like I didn't know what was going on in the back seat. We got to the restaurant and my boyfriend runs in to grab the food. I'm left alone in the car with our friend and I'm trying to act like I'm browsing my phone when really I'm watching and listening as hard as I can. We don't talk. My boyfriend gets back in the car and I complain that I'm tired and it's been a long day. Let's drop him off, etc. So I drive us back to our friend's car and he doesn't get out of the vehicle. He just sits there. I have to get a little rude and ask him to please get out so I can go home. He gets out of the car and walks over to the passenger side. I start getting really scared and I suspected the worst. He pulled a gun out of some kind of bag he had on the seat and he just walks over to our car with it. I don't know why the fuck I did this, but I was so pissed I just got out of my car and walked right up to him. I was maybe 3 feet away from him and I could see it was a loaded 9mm. I kept asking him over and over again, "What are you doing?" Because apparently that's all my brain could think of. I told him to get into his car and go home. He never said anything during this whole time, just kind of cried and had this wild look in his eye. For whatever reason, he got back to his car and drove off. I told my boyfriend obviously we're never going to hang out with him again, and I didn't even want him to talk to him anymore. No contact. A few months pass, and he occasionally messages me through the PlayStation or texts my phone. He says a lot of random stuff, and I just ignore it. It turns out he moved to Tennessee, near Nashville. I don't know why. He had a roommate, and I think his girlfriend lived there. I'm not really sure about the situation. I think maybe he's turning his life around and getting a fresh start down there. I'm not interested in any kind of friendship with him, and I know he needs help beyond what I could offer. Again, I reached out to his sister and let her know that he had a gun. She managed to get it from him somehow, but it did little good in the end. I get a call around 11 p.m. one night that wakes me up. It's a man claiming he's a detective in Gallatin, Tennessee. and my heart skips a beat. I start sweating and immediately ask what happened. Apparently, my former friend stabbed someone to death on Halloween Day. I don't know all the details, and the articles about it are kind of sparse. The whole thing is really surreal, and I'm just feeling like I'm lucky that I didn't get shot last summer. This whole thing turned out way longer than I meant it to be, but that's the story. I'm still feeling creeped out by the whole ordeal, and I'm kind of feeling sick after writing this. I was 18 and I got a job as a bartender at one of the more popular nightclubs in my city. To start with, I didn't even apply for the bartender job, but applied as a chef. The owner of the place told me that he wanted me in the bar where the people would see me because I looked too good to be in the kitchen. This man was twice my age. I worked my first night and felt very creeped out by this dude, so I politely told him that I didn't want the job. He proceeds to call me and text me for 2 weeks, asking me to come back to work for him. About 2 months later, I hear from my friend that the man had been accused of 5 rapes, all different girls, and a small explosion went off by the entrance of the nightclub, and the place was now shut down for good. Never heard how long of a sentence he got. Remember, always trust your gut feeling,